G'day folks, welcome to the latest episode of the Make You Known podcast. Today we are speaking to the creative director and pastor of one of the UK's largest churches, a multinational which has a reputation for producing some of the most well-known current contemporary worship songs. It does theatre productions and a whole lot more. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Dan Blythe of Hillsong London.
Thanks, Jason.
Dan, it's great to have you with us. You can find Dan online at Dan Blythe 8 on Instagram and at Media Collective London, all one word. Today we're going to be talking about creativity and a whole host of things kind of connected to that in relation to the church and our Christian walk here. So before we dive into any of that, I just want to ask you a bit about yourself, kind of get to know you a little bit, because, you know, when people think about a pastor, their stereotypical image is maybe not a tattooed guy with a penchant for boxing. So how does that Dan Blythe become the Dan Blythe running not running Hillsong, but you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, before I get into it, I just want to say thank you so much for having me as part of your podcast, and absolutely love your photography. Like, I look at your stuff and, you know, I guess I've got a question before I answer my questions. Do you get to eat the food that you take pictures of?
That is one of the most common questions I get asked, and the answer is sometimes.
Nice.
So last week I was on a job all day in London and didn't get a bite, which upset me a lot.
Best dish you've ever had there?
Best dish I had, there's a local restaurant which I do a lot of work for out in the Kent countryside called The Poet at Matfield.
Nice.
And they do delicious food. It's really, really good. So check it out.
I'm going to go.
Give me a text and I'll let you know.
So in answer to your question, it's funny, the tattoos I actually got after I became a Christian. Because I became a Christian when I was 18, and the boxing I started after I was a Christian. So really for me, I was just following the crowd, through my teenage years, I just do whatever, went through school, just found it pretty fun, didn't really have any meaning or purpose. Then I went backpacking to Australia, met some Christians, and they just had this sense of like purpose in life, this joy, this confidence, this courage. And after spending a week with them, I just knew I wanted to encounter that Jesus that they spoke about. And I did give my life to Jesus Christ. And then since then, I've just, I guess, remained me, but become more like Christ. And I think, the tattoos and the boxing would have been things that I would have had whether I am Christian or not Christian. I don't think those things matter if you're not. I guess when you think about the stereotype of pastors and preachers, they've always changed that history. Like, you go all the way back and it was just like white males, and there was no female preachers or female leaders. There was no black pastors or black leaders. But then obviously everything changes as time changes. And so, I guess people say, I don't look like a pastor, but a lot of pastors I meet do just dress how they want to dress, get tattoos or box or do whatever. So I think the nice thing about where we are today is that pastoring has nothing to do with your background, has nothing to do with your education, has nothing to do with your skin color or your gender, has nothing to do with the aesthetics. It's just got everything to do with whether you've got a heart, just to love people and help people. So, I see it as the greatest honor to do what I do.
That's great. Well, as you were speaking, that made me think of, I was thinking about David earlier, and he was the least likely of that family, wasn't he, to be the leader? And actually he was the shepherd, he had the shepherd heart, and that was what qualified him to shepherd. And I guess, is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely, yeah. I think motive is everything, really. And if you go into pastoral ministry with the wrong reasons, whether it's for fame or for fortune or for whatever, you end up just destroying people's lives. But if you go in for the right motivations, then no matter how hard it gets and no matter how good it gets, you're there with the right motivation. And it's so key, yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, I'm just going to dive off into a side question there, because you just said about no matter how hard it gets or how good it is. Now, this is something I've been thinking about recently. When times are really hard, how do you, as someone who has to face the public and kind of keep up a persona, how do you do that? Do you find that difficult, or is there a balance to be had, or between authenticity and kind of just...
Yeah, that's such a good question. If you look at Paul the Apostle, he clearly says that he faced many hardships and he had weaknesses and he had struggles. But Paul would just hold fast to Jesus Christ, hold tightly to Jesus. And because of that, the fruit or the result was that he had a hope. And so whether he was in prison after being beaten up, he's still there praising Jesus because he's got a hope. So when I go through hardship, and my hardship is nothing compared to what Paul went through, but when I do go through it, I'm still praising God. I still got faith that he's going to come through because, he's my rock, he's my anchor. And so none of that is fake. So even though I'm going through stuff, I'll be real with people about that. I'm actually going through stuff, but I still know that my fear level is not going to be the same as someone who doesn't know Jesus, because the fact that I do know Jesus means that my fear level goes down and my faith level goes up. So it's my trust in Jesus which gets me through, any hard time.
That's good. Yeah, and I suppose there's some merit, isn't there, in actually just being open about that, because as a role model and for younger people, you don't want them to think your life is just all glory and it's all together, right?
I would say it's like 99% not altogether, not glory. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, even on social media, the problem is that you're always posting your highlights, so people just see all the best bits. But you don't put your bad days and your struggling days and your weak days. But that's that's life. And my wife has had a lot of health issues. Even at work and everything that I'm doing throughout this season, it's been like the most nuts, crazy season of my whole life. But I'm not gonna post having the worst day of my life. It's like, sometimes when you post that stuff on social media, it has the reverse effect, and it looks like you're trying to get attention and you're trying to cry out. All I know is that I've got a circle of close friends, and to them I just tell them where I'm really at. They give me honest feedback, they help me out, they pray for me, and then I crack on. But I try and make it really clear to people that life is not just like mountaintops and high and valleys. In mountaintops and peaks, it's always, there's valleys, and it's actually in the valleys where I feel like God does the most incredible miracles.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting what you just touched on, that actually it's important to have the people close to you that you are kind of real with, and then like when you're doing more pub, you don't have to sort of moan to everyone, as it were, and there's that's helpful for me, actually. So we want to talk a bit about creative stuff, obviously, because that's your kind of forte, right? Amongst, as well as the pastoring. So obviously, you look at the universe, and from the intergalactic down to the microscopic, God is wildly creative, and it's just insane. Like when you look at stuff like anything from BBC Natural History Unit, you just kind of get your mind blown away. So it strikes me that obviously God's very creative, and He made us to be creative, right? It's kind of there in the beginning.
Yep.
But it's not something we really talk about much as Christians generally. Now, how can we change this? How can we what can we do? So, for example, you've already mentioned I'm a photographer. Like, what can I do that's explicitly going to make God glorifying creativity?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think we've boxed creativity to like art, but creativity is so much more than that. The single parent who's creating a dinner for the kids every night, like, that is creativity. The accountant who's pulling together spreadsheets and displaying it so people can read the data, that's creativity. And so there's creativity everywhere. And like you said, God created the heavens and the earth. He created us, and we're created in His image. So when we are creative, we reflect the characteristics of the Father. And so I think it's just not boxing creativity and just looking at what you love. I think what we've done is we've put creativity into our career. And so we think if we're going to be a creative person, we need to have a creative career. But all the way through history, you had the artists. But other than that, everyone just worked for survival. You'd be a butcher, a baker, a farmer, a carpenter. You just, Paul was a tent maker. Like, you just do whatever you could so you could survive, But now we're in this place where everyone's like, right, what creative job do I want? And it's great that we're in a season where people get a choice, but I don't think we should limit creativity to your job, your vocational career. It's actually just a way of life, and it's just looking at every day, seeing God's creation and seeing what's in your hand, and just seeing how you can get an imagination from God, creativity from God, and bring, I guess, freshness and make what's in your hands, take it to a new level, make it better, for God's glory, to hopefully help and serve people.
Yeah, that's cool. So it's all kind of tied in with what have I got, and what can I bring to the table, and how can I use that for Him?
Totally.
And what would be like a practice? Could you give a practical example? So me as a photographer, what can I do if I want to do something tomorrow? For Him.
Yeah. So you're a photographer and you take photos of food, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those dinners that you're taking photos of, like, that is creativity there. Those chefs have taken those ingredients and they've created something amazing, and then you're shooting that in a way which displays just how good those meals are. I've seen a lot of photos of food and they haven't done the food justice. But the way you take it is you've got a certain eye, which many people don't have, which enables people to see food, in the way that the chef wants it to be seen. So I just think, to be honest, creativity is finding out what you love to do, finding out maybe what God's gifted you in, what skill, and then doing that to the best of your ability. And the best of your ability is giving God glory, giving God honor, because you're using the skills and the gifts that He's given you, and you're giving Him the adoration and the praise for doing so. And so you take photos. I'm not good at taking photos, but I can do other things. And so I'm just going to do my things as well as I can. And if you do your things as well as you can, then hopefully we're all doing that, for God's glory, and we're enjoying doing it at the same time. And that's the whole thing. I don't believe the Christian life, especially in creativity, is something to be endured. I think it's something to be enjoyed. And if you're enjoying what you're doing creatively, and I am, then that's great. I think God loves it when he sees his children just creating in a way that brings us joy and happiness.
Yeah, and I think what you're touching on there is something I've heard you speak about before often, which is collaboration. Would you like to just share a little bit about your thoughts on that and its power?
Yeah. Just, in the church, you got everyone, working together, coming together, and you get the rich and the poor sitting next to each other, the black and the white sitting next to each other, the young and the old sitting next to each other. And there's not many environments around the world where you see that. So the opportunity for collaboration and collaborating with people who don't think like you, don't dress like you, don't act like you, but different to you, but still have the same heart, which is a heart for Jesus and his people. What an opportunity for collaboration. And in collaboration, what happens is you're allowed to do things that you could not do by yourself. So when Adidas started in 1949 by Adi Dassler, the German lad, he was selling trainers for about 70 quid. Then he collaborated with Kanye West. He had the label called Yeezy. They released the Adidas Yeezys. They get sold for about 250 quid, even resold for up to 1,000. So that collaboration allowed them to do what they could not do by themselves and go to a place they could not go to by themselves. And that's the beauty of collaborating in church, I believe. It allows us to come together and do what we could not do by ourselves, and just we reflect God. God is a triune God, is the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Like, that's a collaboration. They are one, but working together, and it's the same. When we collaborate, I feel like we reflect again the heart of the Father.
Yeah, and I suppose that kind of comes back to that Corinthians where Paul says, like, the hand cannot say to the foot, I have not need of you, and all that. There's like this actual fact that we need each other to live, and even in the process of existing, you need two people to create another human. We can't exist as isolated individuals, which is quite interesting, because actually often in the creative world, people can be quite insular, and just by nature, which is obviously it's just the way people are, but we do need people, right?
100%. Yeah. 99% of your future, they say, is in the hands of somebody else. So I'm an introvert. If I've got a day to myself, I want to be by myself. I love people and I want to help people. So so I spend my time that. But when I'm recharging, introvert, like, I love just being by myself. But I know if I'm an introvert person and I spend my whole life just by myself, I'm not going to do the things that God's called me to do. I'm not going to be able to reach people and help people. And so getting out of your comfort zone and having a conversation with people. Because I always say that your collaboration is dictated by your conversation. And so if you're not having conversations with people, you're limiting your collaboration. And thinking about your body language and your tone of voice is so important when collaborating. Because even in this conversation, you're leaning in, you're smiling. I'm like, I want to collaborate with Jason. But if you were there, like, being rude, stone cold, no body language, no tone of voice, then I wouldn't be keen to collaborate. And so often, we're in meetings with people and we just don't think about how important it is just to smile, just to encourage, just to be warm with people. Because as you show that body language and tone of voice, you're showing signs for collaboration, and that leads to something extraordinary. The problem with today is everything's on technology, WhatsApp, emails, texts, and that's only like the words, that's only a few words, and you're missing your body language and your tone of voice. And so much stuff gets missed. And so I truly believe for us as creatives, it's important for us to do this. Meet face to face and not do everything online, but actually build like strong relationships. That's what collaboration looks like.
Yeah, no, that's great. And on a side note to that, when you're talking about working with people and all that kind of, body language and stuff, as a church have very high standards of creativity and production. The bar is very high, and in the creative industries, I know this from my world, like, sometimes you have to be very brutal to kind of achieve standards. Like, you have to be critical, right?
Yeah.
So how do you achieve those kind of standards in a kind of loving way? Because you must have to reject a lot of stuff, or do you not?
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head by just using the word standards. So everyone has their own standard. Let's just say their own standard of excellence. And if Bono or Kanye West came to one of our Sunday services, they would probably think our standard is low. But if
I disagree,
but if someone from let's just say someone who's just started a band and started production come to our church, they might think the production is high. And so I think it is relative to the individual. I guess for us, it's just important that we're just doing what we're doing as good as we can, and with the right motivation, which is, I guess, to give God the glory. I guess we'd call it the extra mile attitude. In Matthew 5 verses 41, Jesus says, if someone asks you to go 1 mile, go for them 2. So if someone asks you to go the extra mile, it's not the extra mile, because the extra mile is something you choose to do. So I guess what we find in our culture is that there's a lot of individuals that go the extra mile, not because they're told to, but because they choose to. They want to make it as good as they can. Having said that, within what people would call a high level of excellence, we have so many mistakes and we have so many failures, and there's this like raw, real, like, yeah, we are making mistakes. Like we were recording last night at the warehouse, countless mistakes, but we're not going to live with a fear of failure. We're going to keep doing what we're doing as high level of excellence as we can. And when we fail, we fail. But we just want to make sure that we're not trying to drop the bar to make it easy for ourselves. We want to lift the bar so that someone can see something and hopefully want to share something with their friends. I remember when I became a Christian when I was age 18. As soon as I encountered Jesus, I wanted to invite other people to church. And the church, there was just something about it where I was proud of my church. I wanted them, the language was not Christianese. It was in a language that they could understand. It wasn't, it wasn't exclusive. It was very inclusive. And so really what we try and do is just create stuff in a way in which I guess people in our church are proud, or I guess they're just happy to invite someone from work who's never been to church. Someone who even hates religion. We say they'll get in an argument at work about religion, and they'll say, "Well, do you want to come and check out church?" And they'll invite them. And I think people only invite people to church if they actually see it as a safe space, an environment where they can do so.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so on kind of related note, obviously, as I say, your standards are very high. Production is very slick. How do you think? Do you ever think it's too slick? Do you think, because Jesus doesn't strike me as particularly kind of slick, does he, or on trend, or was he? I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, if you think about his first miracle, he turned water into wine, but it doesn't say it was like 3.0 on the Vivino app. No, the Bible says it was the best wine. They're like, whoa, where's this best wine come from? So why did Jesus turn it into the best wine that they've ever had? Why didn't he just turn it into mediocre wine or average wine? I don't know. Like, I guess Jesus was the best, so everything he did was the best. It's such a hard one. Like, I think in the way Jesus communicated in his storytelling, like that's pretty. I mean, is slick the word, or is it just very clever, intelligent? Obviously, he was speaking from on behalf of the Father, so he could speak in such a confident and powerful way. But I think when it comes to the slickness, like there's lots of things we do which I don't feel like is slick. There's lots of stuff that could be better. When it comes to our systems and our processes and our management, where there might be other churches and they've got that stuff all slick and that perfect, and but let's just say the Sunday services where people tend to call us slick, the music and the lights and all that kind of stuff, that might not be an area of, let's just say, slickness for them. And so I guess everyone's got their strengths, or everyone's got their areas where they add expertise and stuff. And you got to remember, we're in London, and so people come to London for creative arts. They come for performing arts, and so a lot of people who come into our church, they lift the bar because that's their profession. They do that anyway, And so, a lot of the people, we just have a huge volunteer army of people involved, and it just comes from them because they work at a high level anyway. If you go to our campus, let's say, on the other end of the country, it's an amazing campus, but I would definitely say the levels of quality and excellence are definitely lower than they would be in central London. So the slickness is not the same, but that's because there's people doing the skill stuff there which don't have the same skills as the people working in London. So I think it's all relative, and again, the aim is not to be slick. The aim is just to create something which isn't distracting for people, so people can just come in and just focus on God. Mm-hmm. Sometimes when stuff is unrehearsed and unpracticed, it's more distracting.
Yeah, that's fair. I suppose as you're talking, one of the words that came to my mind was kind of narrative, and without sort of diving down a massive rabbit hole, I suppose a lot of art and creativity is about telling a story, and people will paint a painting or create a song because you can express something in a way that's much more profound than if you just said it.
Yeah.
A lot of songs are about how someone's felt about something and expressed it much more powerfully than if they'd just written, "I feel like this."
Yeah.
So I suppose kind of what you're doing as well is you're using that narrative, it's creative means of telling people a story, and it's the greatest story that's ever been told. So we need to reach people in different ways, because I guess, some people everyone's heart is reached in a different kind of way. But on that note, how do we balance kind of being contemporary and kind of relevant and doing what Paul talks about, coming as a Jew to the Jew and a Greek to the Greeks and all that kind of stuff? So how do we do that without kind of just entertaining people and making sure that they're getting reached and churched, because I think Francis Chan in his book Letters to the Church talks about, I don't know if you read that book, but he talks about how we need to come to church. Now maybe I'm going on to a slightly other avenue, so just steer me back. But sure. He's like, we need to come to look how we can serve, not look how we can be entertained. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Like, in the current generation, I don't want to stereotype, but there is this sort of like consumeristic, narcissistic, it's all about me. I come to church, I want this teaching, I want this worship, I want this worship leader, I want these songs, me. And the job of pastors and leaders within church is to disciple people and lead people in a place where they become like Christ-like, to a place of maturity where it's no longer I, but Christ that lives in me, and it takes time for people to get there. But what we do is try and put the net out really wide. So you got people who are non-Christian coming to church, even every Sunday, because they're just sensing something. At the same time, you got people and you're just trying to lead them in the next step. And so, yeah, I think it's all, the way all that kind of stuff happens is through personal conversations with people. We definitely don't try and like fire a shotgun of conviction from the platform, because, there's just so many people at different journeys and stages. So our discipleship would be more in groups, which Francis Chan is an absolute legend about. Like he moved away from the mega church into the underground church, small groups. And, more than ever, we're realizing, that has always been the backbone of our church, but it's definitely gone to the priority of our church. Because that's what church is. So I guess I don't know if I'm answering the question, but to deal with the consumeristic culture of our society, it's just important that we're having one-on-one conversations with people and we're leading them where they're at, and we're not just like pointing the finger of judgment, but we're actually just showing people and helping people and praying them through stuff so they can see stuff. Because when I was 18, when I encountered Jesus, my life was a mess and I was doing a lot of stuff which is not the Jesus way, but luckily they weren't like pointing the finger telling me to get out. They're just showing me love and encouragement. And as I grew in my love for Jesus Christ, I stopped loving the other stuff which was, I guess, holding my life back, and that stuff just sort of fell away. And it was those people who discipled me which helped me, and really I want to do the same for others.
So on that note, so we talked about how people come into church and might get reached through creativity and all this kind of stuff. But what about actually kind of Christian themed stuff in the mainstream? And so what I mean by this is we spoke to Dr. Dan Strange in one of our previous podcasts, who wrote a book, Plugged In, about connecting Christianity with culture, and how we can reach people through the kind of media and all this kind of stuff. He sort of at a given point in that book kind of asked the question, like, why is there not more like Christian creators who are doing stuff in the mainstream, like movies and songs with good kind of narratives and all that kind of stuff? That can we do that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's not so many because there's not a market for it. Like if you think, people in the world, like, I mean, you can make movies just for Christians, but like there's like, many of the world who aren't Christians. So like, there's one aspect which of it is just like, is there finance to be able to just make Christian movies for Christians? But really, I think what we're getting at is, wouldn't it be amazing to see Christian creators and directors making blockbuster movies, right? Like big stuff. So what we need is Christian directors, and for that to happen, it means we need to start looking at the young teenagers that we have in our world, and start, just telling them that, if they want to be a director, they can be a director, and start investing in them, like getting them a little camera or give them opportunity to make stuff. Don't wait for them to have to go to university and all this stuff. Like we've got this thing called Young Creatives, and so it's for youth age 16 to 21, and we're just trying to like give them a huge range of opportunity when it comes down to creativity. So like fashion design, photography, videography, editing, sound, all that, the whole lot, and like try this, try that. And if one of them finds a passion or something, then we start mentoring them and giving them opportunity to grow. And so how could we see more people, more Christians like directing like some of the biggest blockbusters of the movies? I just think if the church makes a space for for them to develop their skills and have opportunity, then who knows what will come from that.
Yeah, I suppose one person that springs to my mind, we're having this conversation, is Lauren Daigle. And there's some level of, it's not major controversy around her, but anyway, either way, I like what she does. And I think she's actually done that quite well, because she's, what would you rather your kids were singing when they're growing up? Would you rather them singing like about illicit love affairs that you might have on the Taylor Swift song or whatever? That's no disrespect to Taylor, but, or something that Lauren's singing, which is like Who You Say I Am, and well, actually that's a Hillsong song, but You Say, that's the one of Lauren Daigle. So I think she's managed to break into that niche where she's actually spelling out Christian narratives, but on a mainstream platform, and it's, I guess, like, how can we want more of that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the church has always said, like, Christians have to write Christian music, and they're not allowed to write, they called secular music, and I'm really not into those two terms. But I don't believe there's anything like Christian music. I think there's Christian lyrics, and you can put Christian lyrics to any melody, whether it's classical or calypso or R&B and rock and roll. Like, I don't really care about the melody of the music. But Christian music, I guess, is just Christian lyrics attached to that. But then for Christians to write songs which are not just about God, but about life, like, I will have a conversation with someone who's a non-Christian, and I will talk about life with them, and I'll help them. We'll talk about forgiveness. We'll talk about patience. We'll talk about generosity. And because they're not into God, I don't talk about God. They don't want to talk about God, but they want to talk about life. And I can help them in life by just talking about the basic biblical principles. And sometimes at the end of it, I did a wedding once and I spoke about all these things, and someone came up to me, they're like, wow, where did you get all that stuff? I'm like, oh, I actually just got it from the Bible. They're like, no way, tell me more. And so I think, even talking about the biblical principles in a way in which isn't even saying about God, and people can understand that those principles, the living the Jesus way, actually helps them in life, creates a bridge for them to then be open to what Jesus is all about. And so if we can see Christian artists, directors, whatever, making stuff which might not be explicitly about Jesus or God, but can be from the heart of a Christian, which still shows great values of what Christianity is about, people might see those values, be able to relate to those values, and then it might lead on to a follow-on question. So, why do you live the way you live? And so I think it'd be great to see some more of that stuff in the media, just stuff which gets a conversation going.
Yeah. So... Moving on a little bit, we're nearly going to be at our quick fire round, but just before we go there, a couple of questions. What would you say to someone who has they want to do stuff, creative design and all that, but they feel no motivation, or, you know how it is, sometimes we can be a bit like that, can't we? And what would you say to the unmotivated people out there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one, because I feel like your motivation is the thing that's going to give you the fuel for your creativity. And so if you're not motivated, maybe it's because your why isn't really clear. Maybe you want to be creative because you think it's cool. Maybe you want to be creative because other people are creative. Maybe you want to be creative because people on Instagram are creative. I don't know, like, work out your why. If you want to be creative because you want to grow in something that you love, like a hobby or a skill set, and you want to learn that, you want to learn guitar, you want to learn how to paint, that should come from a place of love, and that love should be your motivation, and that motivation will then fuel you to learn and upskill yourself. So I would just say, work out your why you want to be creative, and hopefully that should lead you to a place where you've got motivation.
Yeah. And I wonder if there's some connection as well. I remember reading another interview with you, and you it transpires are a very disciplined person. And is there a connection there with that? Because I suppose with you, like, in your position, there's deadlines, there's times where stuff just has to be done, and it's not a case of, I just don't feel like it today. It's like, it's got to be done.
Yep.
So does discipline come into it at all?
Definitely, yeah. I would say I am a disciplined person. Like, I'm disciplined with everything that's in my control. Because there's so much in this world which is outside of my control. COVID-19 is outside of my control. What happens with finances is outside of my control. So I'm not going to freak out and worry about what's outside of my control. I'm just going to focus on what's inside of my control. What I eat, where I exercise, what time I go to sleep. They're three very simple things, but because I'm in control of those things, I'm sensible with those things, which allows me to operate in a way in which I guess is more healthy than if I wasn't being disciplined in those areas. And even at the gym, you only get out what you put in. And I find with disciplined people, they're normally disciplined in all areas of their life. Like, you don't have people who are so disciplined at work, but then they're not disciplined in the gym. I find if someone's disciplined, they're disciplined in all areas. So if you want to become more disciplined, because it is something you grow in and develop, it doesn't happen overnight, just try and find one thing that you want to do. So maybe it's like making your bed every morning. And just say, right, every day I'm going to make my bed every morning. And you do that for a month, and you've created a habit. And it's your daily habits which shape your future. And you'll find as you start getting discipline in some of the small areas, you'll see it going throughout your whole life. Like, if you brush your teeth twice a day, like, that's discipline. You're disciplined. Why? Because you care about your health. You care about the teeth that you see, that people are going to see. And so if you can do it for your teeth, then you can do it in other areas. Maybe you just haven't realized that. So just work out where you want to be disciplined, and then apply yourself.
I think that's really good, because the other thing is, once something becomes a habit, is it stops almost being an effort, right? It can be really hard to start something, but if you're so, like, ingrained that it's just every day you're doing something, then it's like, it stops being
That's right.
That's what. Anyway. So let's move on a little bit into the. Well, actually, just before we go into the quick fire round, what's your view of church going forward post COVID, just on a different level? Because I think, again, that does connect with the creative stuff. But
yeah, for sure. I mean, if I can use a biblical term, like I believe that God is pouring new wine, and He wants to pour it into new wineskins. Because back in the day, you couldn't put new wine into old wineskins because they'd just tear and disintegrate. And I think God wants to do something new. I don't see in the Bible it's saying that you have to have services with like 4 songs, prayer, tithe, message, or like a lot of the things which we just do every week. It is biblical in terms of worship's biblical, giving to the church is biblical, teaching the word is biblical, giving people opportunity to encounter Jesus. It's all biblical. But there's nowhere it says it has to happen in this way every time this week. What is biblical is that meeting together in groups, community, helping each other, looking after the needs of the people in the community, getting around the word together and worshipping together. And so, what does that look like in the future? It could be in VR glasses together. It could be, small groups, and you meet once a month at the O2 Arena for corporate worship. Like who knows what God wants to do? And I think that the churches which are just listening to God and open to anything, not clingy to the method or the style, but just open to whatever God wants to do, I think God will do something amazing. I don't think He's clingy to the name of Hillsong. I don't think He's clingy to the name of any other church. I think He just cares about His people and His Spirit moving. And I think that leaders who are open to what He's going to do will just be wowed and overwhelmed by just seeing God's goodness and His greatness move.
Yeah, I wonder if there is something of that about being as little children to some extent, because what you're just saying there just made me think about some stuff where, I think we can tend to, well, you not so much, but in my background, we can tend to put God in a box and say, this is how He will work and how He won't work, as if we kind of know Him better than He does. So we need to be open, right? Is that the kind of message?
100%, yeah.
Just kind of to what He's going to do. That's cool. Okay, so let's crack on with the quick fire ones. And I'm going to start with what one thing do you know now that you wish you'd known as a 20-year-old?
That when Paul had his weaknesses, he prayed 3 times for God to take it away, and God didn't take it away. But God used his weakness, caused Paul to be intimate with God, which led to humility. So that shaped his character. And I think my weakness was always fear. I've always had a fear of public speaking, which is crazy because it's one of the things I kind of do, regularly at the moment. And I guess at the time I felt my weaknesses and my fears were things to avoid. But now I realize they're things to embrace because God will use them. So I wish I knew that when I was 20 and I wouldn't have run away from so many God opportunities.
That's great. And how do you keep going through discouragement / dark night of the soul?
Yep. I just press into God and I pray. I make sure that's my instant reaction. My instant reaction isn't to call my wife or to call my parents or to call my friend. My instant reaction is just to pray to God first, and then I'll call my mates and I'll just speak things out. I just tell them, be honest, vulnerable, transparent, and then they'll tell me the truth about whether I'm in the right, whether I'm in the wrong, all that kind of stuff, and then we'll pray. And so, it's just kind of basic, but yeah, I always make sure that when I'm in my darkest moments, I don't stay in the dark moments by myself, but like I involve the people who I know love me and I love them.
Great. And so what does success look like to Dan Blythe?
Success will not be defined by the way the world defines it, which would be more material things, more fame, more prominence, more positions. Success for me would be where you can invest in people in such a way in which after you're gone, those people are better. Those people are helped. Maybe it's not so much about success. Maybe it's more about greatness. Mother Teresa, she was great. Why was she great? Because she just gave her life for other people. I don't want to be great. I don't need great on my tombstone. But what I believe is that if I just live my life to help others, then I will live a successful life. Because success isn't about you as an individual. I believe it's about your sphere of influence, the people around you.
What would be your top book recommendation other than the Bible?
Top book recommendation other than the Bible. Well, I guess if you want something It's going to challenge you in your creative mindset. Owen McManus has always been a bit of a legend when it comes to writing and articulating what God does through, I guess, the creative world. And so he's got a book called The Artisan's Soul. So if you haven't read that, I'd say read that.
I will add that to my book list, my ever-expanding must-read list.
Nice.
If you could send one tweet-sized message to 18 to 30-year-olds today, what would it say?
It would say, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Brilliant. Dan, thank you so much. It's been great to chat to you, and I really appreciate you giving up your time. And hopefully there's been something here which will inspire other people to keep on pursuing creatively.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate everything you're doing and love catching up.
Well, thanks, Dan. We really appreciate your time and that conversation. Listeners, watchers, I hope you did too. If you have any feedback, something you enjoyed, you didn't enjoy, further comments and questions, please drop a comment in the comment section or DM us. You can get in touch with us on Instagram at make_you_known. Next time, we'll be speaking to Patrick Reagan, author of Honesty Over Silence and When Faith Gets Shaken, about mental health. And until then, stay safe, keep well, and we look forward to seeing you then.